everybody at BlackRock will laugh about this story, but I was in marketing. I had thought that everybody in the company knew. I eventually wanted to get back to the client side of the business. But what was interesting is that because BlackRock had grown so much, there were people who thought I was only in marketing. I heard that they were going to make a change in this retirement group. I thought for sure I was going to get Anne. It didn't quite turn out that way. And so what they decided to do was have an interview process. I blew them away and I got the role. So it has a good outcome. But it is sort of a reminder that not everybody knows your story. I could tell the BlackRock story. I had to tell the Anne Ackerley story.
Welcome to LED, Leadership with Ed. I'm Ed McGill, co-founder and partner at McGill Jungie Wealth Management and the podcast host of LED. And I'm continuing my journey on leadership and just understanding what makes people great, how do you inspire others, etc. And on today's show, it's going to be a lot of fun. We have Anne Ackerley, who in 2024, for the fifth year in a row, was on Barron's 100 Most Influential Women in the U.S. Finance. And so that's awesome. And she is listed first because it is Anne Ackerley. I think it's because she was the best of that group. It could be because her last name begins with A. And also, she had an incredible career at BlackRock, which we'll talk about. BlackRock's the largest investment money manager in the world, probably close to almost $14 trillion worldwide. And she had so many great roles along the way. And the three questions we're going to ask Anne about today, and then we'll riff off of those, is, what was it like to work with Larry Fink? He's the co-founder and CEO of BlackRock and one of the most influential people, really in the world. We're going to ask how she was able to really progress as fast as she did through all these different roles. Who were her mentors? What was the hurdles? What did she learn along the way? What bits of wisdom and just things that she can instill on those listening of that career path, and really what was her proudest accomplishment. And then one of the fun, you guys may notice that her back screen is a little bland. Well, that's because Anne not only has her undergrad and master's from Harvard, but she went back to school. She's in Stanford now. She's actually in Palo Alto in the Distinguished Career Institute. So we're going to ask her, what were you thinking going back to school after such a great career? But first, I did want to thank everyone for, being with us on this inaugural year of LED. It's been great. We get to be on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. If you like what you're hearing today, make sure you like, comment, and share. And we're going to have a great show today. So you can catch new episodes every other Wednesday. But now let's get to Anne. Welcome, Anne. And I think you're in your apartment there in Palo Alto. Is that correct?
I am. I'm delighted to be here, Ed, and to be joining your show, which I've listened to the past ones. They've been terrific. But yes, I'm in my dorm room in Palo Alto. So.
But one of the funny things, we'll spend more time on that later, in her LinkedIn post, it was really funny. She said, I really like my roommate because your husband went out there with you and he went back to school as well too. Is that correct?
Yes, we are both part of this Stanford Distinguished Careers Institute, and we're both here and we're both taking classes.
That is awesome. So she got to choose a roommate. She said she still liked him, so we thought that was a positive. I'm always intrigued by, leaders that you hear about and wonder, are they the same in person or in their day-to-day versus when you see them maybe on Squawk Box or just, articles being written. Tell us a little bit about Larry Fink, and because you've always spoken so highly of him when we've been on calls together. You and I have a great relationship, talk, pretty regularly on a number of different things. But tell me a little bit about his leadership style, what you saw over the years, how that changed, developed, et cetera. Because I think you were at BlackRock right around about 25 years, so you probably saw a big evolution in him and his leadership skills.
Yeah, I absolutely. And I think incredibly highly of Larry. I mean, look at what I would say he and a team have created. I joined BlackRock in 2000. So was there for 25 years. When I joined, there were 500 people. Now there are over 22,000, and
oh, wow.
And the world's largest asset manager. I've learned a ton from Larry, and what I would say as a leader, first and foremost, he's a visionary. I mean, full stop. And I often say, I would follow him anywhere.
Oh, wow. What a great compliment.
He's just such a visionary. When you say people see things in advance and early on, I think that really is, what makes Larry great.
Hey, how did that show itself? Was it in your team meetings, or when did you first notice this? Because you came and you were the 500th team member, so then it's relatively small at that time compared to now. Could you see that right away, or was that something that he developed over time?
No, I think Larry has, from the start, even when you think of the early days of BlackRock, right? The whole company was, there were lots of money managers in the world, and they will tell the story of when the 8 co-founders got together, a very influential person told them the last thing, the world needs is another, fixed income money manager. I think that was like one of the first meetings that they had. But what Larry saw, right, was that, people on the buy side didn't really always understand the risks of what they were buying. And, the history of BlackRock is really foundational about being a risk manager. And our whole, they built out the Aladdin system. But it was all about, people on the sell side were selling things that people on the buy side didn't necessarily understand. And I think, just from that very beginning, he was seeing something, the complexity of money management, from the start there. But, I also saw it, I think about when I joined, the firm was primarily fixed income, primarily institutional, although I joined to help build out the wealth management business. But I think what Larry was seeing was, if you're going to serve clients, if you're really going to be the trusted advisor, you can't only have fixed income. You can't only see the world that
From
way.
that lens, yep.
And so, building out our capabilities in equity, you fast forward to after the global financial crisis, understanding the impact of adding index investing. I think about the global expansion. And, I think and then moving into alternatives. I think, Larry would always say, if we're going to be able to advise our clients, you have to see the totality, and you have to see the full world. Yep. And so that, I could see it through those acquisitions. I could see it in the way he approaches risk, and the way he approaches clients. And, I'll tell you, I don't know exactly how old Larry is today, but, he's still the hardest worker at that company, for sure.
That's
his travel schedule, his interaction with clients, his interaction with governments, he's always trying to figure out where the world is going on behalf of the clients of BlackRock.
That's awesome. And when you think, because you had said there was 8 original founders, how many of them were visionaries versus implementers, and how did they navigate maybe some of the personal battles? So when you heard Ann say that Larry was a visionary, and if you think of the book Rocket Fuel, which is tied to the EOS system, you have visionaries and then you have implementers. And actually, based on some of your job titles, and where I saw COO in a couple different roles, that means you maybe were more of an implementer of the vision. But if you had 8 original founders, did you start seeing a hierarchy or a pecking order of who was taking the lead, who was visionaries, how did they navigate 8 strong opinions?
Yeah. Now I wasn't there at the beginning, although an interesting fact is that I was at Merrill Lynch. I was in investment banking. And, BlackRock was my client
Okay.
when they were very tiny. And, some of the first money that they raised were in closed-end funds. And closed-end funds are underwritten, and I was the investment banker. And so in those very early days, I'm thinking BlackRock was founded in 88, but, sort of the early 90s, I would be traveling the country with some of the BlackRock partners, founders, working on closed-end funds. So I've known them really my entire working life.
Yeah.
My understanding was there were 8 of them. There was no hierarchy. They sat in a room and, they worked these things out. And I actually think that's one of the secret sauces of BlackRock is that, in other companies, there can be real hierarchies, right?
Yeah.
Of, who brings in the revenue, maybe who manages the money, maybe the back office is not as important. They were all at the table. They had different skill sets, but they were equal partners. And that ethos sort of continued even as the company grew, right? That all these different parts need to contribute. So, but you said people bring other skills. One of my key mentors in my career was Rob Kaptio, who's the president of today is the president of BlackRock. People will talk about him being the heart of the company. If Larry was the visionary, and I don't want to say Rob wasn't a visionary, but if Larry was adding that, Rob is the heart and the soul and the real people person, the person who really cared about what was the culture that they were building. And they're, even today, right, they are great partners.
Oh, wow.
And, continue to work together. And I think they're a great pairing.
That's interesting you say that because, people do ask, and I know you've met Ross, who was the co-founder and partner of McGill Jungie, of, why have you been able to build what you've built, grow as fast as you had? And it really is that yin and yang that, at the core, we're similar in terms of culture, values, ethics, work ethic, where we want to go and things. But then, he has his skill sets, I have mine, and they're complementary, kind of the yin and yang. And it sounds like maybe that was the same for Larry and Rob, that the 1 + 1 would equal 10, which is how Ross and I always viewed our relationship together.
Yeah, 100%. And, I'm taking a class in entrepreneurship this quarter.
You're going to start your own company now. There you go. Entrepreneurship. She's ready.
There might be some thought. But I'm in this class on entrepreneurship, one of the things we're very focused on is, how do you put together companies? And it's exactly what you said. Your values need to be the same for sure, right? And then you can bring different skill sets, and that's super important. But sort of sharing the same values and sharing the same vision for the company is critically important.
Yeah.
And Rob and Larry did and continue to.
Do that.
And so I learned a ton from both of them in terms of what it is to build a company, to build a culture, and to be a leader.
How did you said Rob was your mentor, and this is great because that ties into the second piece that I said, how did you progress so rapidly? If you go to Ann's LinkedIn, there's so many different, executive level job titles, whether it be the CMO, the COO, et cetera. How did Rob identify you, or did you ask Rob to mentor? How did that relationship start, and how important was that to your career? And then how did you maybe reverse that and start doing that for others while you were at BlackRock?
Yeah, the mentor, right? It's like, I don't actually really remember when he became my mentor. He was very instrumental in bringing me over from Merrill Lynch to BlackRock.
Okay.
he played a big role. And, I loved Merrill Lynch. I have tremendous respect for the company. They paid for me to go back to business school. It was a great place for me to start. But then there comes a time when, maybe you want to flex in a certain way and you can't necessarily do that.
It just doesn't align with where you are at the time.
Doesn't align.
Yeah, no one's mad. It's just, hey, this isn't going to get me to where I want to go, and let's just part friends.
Yeah, and I think Rob recognized that in me, and at the time he said, why don't you come over and help us build the retail business, what today is wealth management. I was ready. I was really ready to go to a smaller company and to build something. One thing I'd say, careers are always a little bit, give and take, and I'm going to say there's some luck involved. When I went to BlackRock, I certainly did not know that it was going to be on a path to be the largest asset manager in the world. But that growth, I contributed to that growth, but that growth also let me grow. And so, I'm running the retail business, right? And we're small, and we're trying to get on distribution platforms, and the senior team there decides that we're going to acquire, Merrill Lynch Investment Management. And I'm suddenly catapulted to going from a small wealth manager to big and having lots of funds, and that changed the role that I was playing and the skills that I was developing.
How scary was that at that time, where you go from small to now this bigger entity? I would assume a little bit outside your comfort zone. They believed in you, but tell me a little bit how you navigated that mentally, on something like that.
What happened was the gentleman who was running the Malim Wealth Management became the head of the business, and I became the COO. And I think that was a real recognition of, it wasn't necessarily easy to take in the moment, but a recognition of I had tremendous execution skills, and he had way more of the relationships with all the distribution partners.
Partners of MLM, yep.
Yeah, and that's what, as I say, sort of my career at BlackRock, a little bit of a give and take. I went from COO of that business to ultimately becoming the COO of our global distribution. And that was institutional and wealth. And it was right at the moment that we were doing the acquisition with iShares.
Yeah.
And whoa, like that, we doubled in size.
Just right then from that, which
just
had to
right
just
then.
be. Yeah.
And it was a fascinating time because, and again, you have to give credit for sort of a vision, because at the time, the notion that active was going to sit with index was crazy. And, I think there were people in the company who thought maybe it was a little crazy, right? We were active managers. And if you believed in active management and active management can add value, what role does index playing? And I was very involved in the thinking through that. And then how were we going to work with our clients and get our clients to, understand what we were doing. And, this comes back to the role of Rob Kaptio, because I was having a lot of fun being the COO of global distribution when Rob asked me to go into marketing. And I was like, what? And Rob will tell the story. He had to
I did see that on LinkedIn and I did wonder how that came about, because it doesn't fit kind of in the flow of your job descriptions.
Yeah, I call myself the accidental CMO. But if you think about that time, right, we had just done the acquisition or merger with iShares. It was right after the global financial crisis, and BlackRock had doubled in size, and we were being confused with, our business model was being confused with, say, some of the banks that had bet against their clients. We were a fiduciary.
Yep.
If clients knew us from BlackRock, they had no idea what we were. Why were we doing index? If they were a BGI client, they were like, "What is this?" There was a lot going on, and Rob said to me, "We're going to bring in someone to do communications and marketing, and we want you to work with her because you know the culture of this company. You know this culture inside and out. You know what we stand for. Go tell the world our story." And up until that point, if you think this is like 2011, BlackRock had wanted to be completely kind of unknown. It didn't seek publicity.
Yep.
And what you realize is, other people tell your story. And we decided we're going to tell our story. We're going to talk about being a fiduciary. We're going to talk about why you put active and an index together in a portfolio. And I spent 3 years in marketing. Unbelievable. Again, Rob had to ask me 3 times. I was like, no, I'm not going. No, I don't know anything about this. How could I be successful? But again, he saw that I could bring the culture, I could bring the who we were, and I could learn the marketing piece. And this is really when BlackRock really started to talk about, we help people build better financial futures, and we are a fiduciary, and we never are on the other side of a trade with our clients. And so that was the beginning of that. But, that was when Rob asked me to do something that I didn't necessarily think made sense at the time.
You know what, Ann, on that, which is interesting, because I remember when you started, you said, Larry was more the visionary, and then Rob was really ingrained in the culture and relationships. But obviously, based on what you just described, and I'll give a few other things here that if I was listening to this, I'd want to make sure I captured, but he really was a visionary for you. Like, he saw what you were capable of and that you could do this before you could see it yourself. And for those of you listening, when you're an executive coming up through corporate America, you have to be careful on what you say yes to, because if it doesn't work well, you get branded, if that area, so Ann likely was thinking, okay, don't know this area. You want me to go over here? What is it you're trying to ask me to do? Yeah. And will that be a black mark or a positive check mark, on my career? Mm-hmm. And so Rob could see that before she could maybe see it for herself. And then this interesting story that BlackRock created is BlackRock had been active management firm, she said. So that means they were managing money, and you had people actually, making decisions, buy, sells, and, everything happening. And then iShares it can be called index funds. It can be called passive management. It's really computer programs just, building out the portfolio. And a lot of in the wealth management space, Ann, is, you had a lot of conflicting, or people would take sides, on that. And in reality, what you said is, no, we see that there's a place for both to improve financial outcomes for our clients, and we are going to be a fiduciary. That was a big leap of faith for BlackRock to do that as well, too, to see the vision of, no, they exist together, and there's a place for both. So great vision out of Rob as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was both Larry and Rob. And again, lots of people, they might have been able to see like it was going to be a good deal, but a lot of people in the company didn't quite understand how this was going to work. And there was a lot of, working to get everybody to understand it could result in better outcomes for our clients. And that's why it's so important to do it. But if I finish the thread of the Rob, I don't think I ever would have gotten my last role, which was the head of the retirement group, had I not sort of had all those other roles, including the marketing. Because when you become a leader of a business, right, and not, again, I had been COO, But when you actually are running a business, so much of it is about storytelling, and so much of it, is about being able to articulate what the team is doing, what we need to do as a business, and tell the story to our clients. And so my 3 years as the Accidental CMO really helped me when I became the head of the retirement group. So kudos to Rob for, as you said, sort of seeing something I didn't see. And, you asked me about mentoring others. I try to do that for other people. I try to, sometimes you can just see in people their greatness.
100%.
And they just need encouragement to, no, you can do it. I can see you can do it. I know you can do it. And they just need some encouragement. And I sometimes feel, maybe women don't always see it. And, that's a role that I've really tried to play, is when I see our young women, you go for it, come on.
Being the cheerleader. And, I love that, because deep down, when you talk to a lot of executives, even at the highest level, at some point they all deal with imposter syndrome, or do I belong, and am I smart enough? And then maybe the degrees look different from one school to the next school, and on that. So it's really just giving, to let someone know that they're in the corner. I hope everyone also picked up how I just found this very intriguing, how Anne politely said, Ed, stop interrupting and asking questions. She said, let me finish my thread on Rob. And it was so hard for me not to just start laughing right there and say, do you see how strategic she was of, I got a really good point here of what led to this. Be quiet. And so I love that. So you should write that down. Hey, great point. Let me finish my thread, get the conversation back on track. That's a very easy, polite way. And she may not even known she was doing it, but right away, because I've been in enough of these meetings, I'm like, that was really, really good. So I like that. Speaking of threads, are there any threads of hurdles? Because you'd mentioned women and mentoring women. Did you have any along the way, whether male, female, et cetera? What were some of the most difficult things or hurdles, or where you were passed over for a role where you thought, God, I really should have got that? Or maybe talk about some of the things that didn't go quite as planned.
Becoming the head of the retirement group, and everybody at BlackRock will laugh about this story, but, I was in marketing, and, I had thought that everybody in the company knew I eventually wanted to get back to the client side of the business.
Yep.
I thought that everybody knew I wanted to run a business. It was very important for me to have P&L responsibility. That was something that I
of a business unit, the profit and loss of that specific business.
And I felt I could do that. But what was interesting is that because BlackRock had grown so much, there were people, and I find this fun, but there were people who thought I was only in marketing.
Yeah, like you grew up in marketing. You started
there. I grew up in marketing, yeah. They had no idea I came over and ran the wealth business. They had no idea I was a banker. And so when I heard that they were going to make a change in running this retirement group, I thought for sure I was going to get Anne. And it didn't quite turn out. It didn't quite turn out that way. Again, there were people who were, oh no, she's a marketer. She can't run a business. And so what they decided to do was have an interview process. And there were 3 of us, and we interviewed with 6 senior executives. And, by all accounts, I blew everybody away. And I knew I could do it.
Yep.
But I needed to, the person who thought I was just the COO, or the person who thought I was just the marketer, bringing all my skills and my passion. I knew that if I could be the head of the retirement group, right, if I could help people save and plan for retirement, it was just such a passion of mine. So anyway, I blew them away and I got the role. So it has a good outcome. But it is sort of a reminder that not everybody knows your story. And so I could tell the BlackRock story. I had to tell the Ann Ackerley story. And fortunately, I got the role, and it turned out to be exactly what I knew, the job of a lifetime.
See, and I love that because, what she just said there is you've got to be able to tell your own story. And I bet you told it in a way that was confidently humble. Like you knew you had the skill sets, but you can't go in there arrogantly.
Yeah.
You had to prepare. You had to think through, what are these questions? What are the main things that they're going to want to know? And then maybe taking some of that marketing expertise now that you had and say, I can tell the Ann Ackerley story of why this fits. So this whole thing of always being prepared, always being able to tell your story, but there has to be a way to tell it in a way that doesn't turn people off, or they're like, man, all she did was just say, I'm great, I'm great, I'm great, I'm great, without really any substance.
I mean, you, I think, know me. That isn't going to be my style.
It is
but,
not.
but
Kind of
I
like when
would
you
say,
said BlackRock wanted to be under the radar, you like that as well too. You can go
Yeah.
out front, but you like just doing your job and getting results, is from what I've gathered.
I love getting results, and the proof will be in the pudding, right?
Yeah.
And when you think about leadership, I mean, there are lots of different ways to be leaders, right? And I mean, that's the great thing, is that we can look at all different leadership. I'm a leader by example, and probably a quiet leader that wants to get results. But I would say I wanted that job, and so figuring out how to tell my story was very important.
Yeah, that's awesome. And for those of us, in this space, we know that, Ann actually ended up, and her team developed a LifePath Paycheck when she said she had a passion for retirement and the American people, or just the people in the BlackRock retirement plans. How do you create more certainties, guarantees, et cetera, when retirement a lot of times is filled with uncertainty in terms of, well, how long am I going to live? What if I run out of money? What if I have healthcare costs? And I think your team really just thought through it through the lens of your clients, of what tools can we put into place to just make this easier for the clients in the BlackRock retirement plans. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, and I'll connect this back to Larry, and maybe vision. LifePath Paycheck was when we went to talk to him about it, right? The notion that you're going to combine investments with insurance, and that can give people better outcomes in retirement, right? Give more certainty, less unpredictability, but higher payout, right? When we went to talk to Larry about it, he got it, and he got it fast. And, I often say, I had to say, like, we need to team up because we're not an insurance company. And, Larry was like, yeah, go build this. And it took longer than we thought, and it was probably harder than we thought. But, but we were, and I think about my own leadership, we were just convinced that this would result in better outcomes for people. And that if we could do this, we could make, people have more certainty. And so, yeah, it took us 6 years. There was a lot of like, why is it taking so long? And, that's another, I would say that's another thing about Larry as a leader. He demands excellence.
The standard.
So,
he had a standard. It was excellence, and we're going to hit it.
And, vision. I also want to say he's an optimist. So as I've come to think about my own leadership style, I think that's critically important. Leaders need optimism, right? They need to, they need to be talking to the team about where we can go and what we can do. And yes, there's pragmatism, you don't want it to be delusional, but you need to believe in hope and that tomorrow's going to be a better day and we can do things. And so but Larry also demands excellence. And so, you get it done, and go through walls if you need to. But if you believe in this, build it. And we did. And, this is what you do every day, right? You help people have the lives that they want to live, right? Whether
Yep.
they're young, as they middle age, when they get older, you want them to have the lives to be able to do what they want to do. And I wanted that too.
Oh, that's awesome. And yeah, the work that you guys did with low cost income annuities in 401k plans and combining the investments and the insurance together, where the math, just supported it. And then for Larry to say, run with that, knowing that it was going to take dollars out of the AUM model,
Yep.
shows me that the company lived, we are fiduciaries, on that, because the math, the math is the math. So that's awesome. Let's talk about Stanford. Tell me about, so you retire after this great career, both at Merrill and then 25 plus years at BlackRock. And how long was that known that you were going to do that at retirement? Or was it more you retired and you looked around and said, yeah, okay, now what? Or tell us a little bit about this journey to go back to school and what you hope, for this next stage of leadership for you.
Well, I was speaking on a panel, and I think it was 4 or 5 years ago at Stanford at the Center for Longevity. And we were talking about how are we all going to finance these longer lives that hopefully we're all going to live. And at my lunch table, there were a few participants from this program called the Distinguished Careers Institute. And they were just talking about, we're here, we're going back to class, and we're thinking about, how do we want to live this next chapter, right? If it's not full-time employment, what might it look like? And I walked away just thinking, this is what I want to do,
Wow.
and I'm going to make it happen. And so I had been, I was building toward it. Now I had to convince my husband that this is what we wanted to do. I think he thought maybe, although he knows me well, but, Anne would retire and, maybe we would travel, take it easy a little bit. And, that's just not me.
That lasted a day. And then you're like, okay, now there, I'm relaxed. Now what? Now what? Let's go.
So, he got very interested in it, and we applied, and we moved out here in September, and we'll be here through June. And, the concept is, lifelong learning, but really being intentional about, what if I live for another 30 years? Mm-hmm. What am I going to do? And, look, some people will stay in their full-time jobs, and that's fantastic if they can. I want to give back, and I'm working on an idea about, helping women with financial security.
That's awesome.
Focused a lot on, look, you do this every day, but, most Americans don't really necessarily understand, many Americans don't understand their finances. And, I think about young people starting out on their careers, and they don't, including my 2 children, do they save? What is this 401k thing? What is this match? What do I do with credit cards? What if I have student debt? So anyway, I have some thoughts about giving back, and with a focus on financial empowerment and financial security. But in the meantime, I'm also learning to play tennis and pickleball. The California weather is amazing. It is all true. So learning to play tennis and pickleball. I ride my bike to class every day. I hadn't been on a bike in 30, maybe 40 years.
That is awesome.
Yeah, and I'm taking a class, I said, in entrepreneurship, also taking class in AI. I mean, I know it's a very hot topic, But this is being taught by a philosophy professor, a law professor, and an engineering professor. And it's, what are we building? What should we be building? And
What's the
I
roles and
feel
responsibilities of what we're
of
building? And
everybody, yeah. And so I feel very energized. I'm in a cohort of 40 people. So think back to like your freshman year. 40 of us go to lunch, 40 of us go to dinner. But we're sort of settling into this program. It has a wellness component to it. So I'm doing a little bit of strength training because if I'm going to live long, I need to be strong. So, anyways, it's a real privilege, and I
That's
feel very
awesome.
fortunate to be here. Yeah, it's
I
very
noticed
cool.
I noticed your biceps were bigger now from the strength. When you just did that,
I
I could see that
Yeah,
on
it's,
that. And the center for, before we close up here, the Center for Longevity, it's just such an interesting topic, and more of them are popping up. And Ann talked about, living for, what if I live another 30 years? And I would say, when husband and wife or spouses get together and they're both, 60 to 65, there's actually a 50% chance, one of them's going to live to 95, 96, and a 10% chance one's getting to 102. And that's just
yeah,
normal American health. And then when the white collar professionals have historically had slightly better longevity tables because they have access to health care and they go more. So it's really even longer. And I know Ross, my business partner, his great uncle lived to 107. He came within 3 months of living in 3 centuries. He died in October of 99. I'm like, dude, why didn't you guys just keep him alive somehow for 3? You're like
wow,
Weekend at Bernie's, keep him up,
right,
prop him up. And, so these 30, 40-year, and we don't even call them retirements anymore. It's more just when you hit financial independence and you do need to start thinking about what's next.
yeah,
How do I keep my mind sharp? And listed some great things. There's so much data on there on strength training, the community. You'd mentioned there's 40 of you that go to lunch, et cetera. When you have friends and community, that makes such a big deal. So there are a lot of things that can, increase that. But the biggest key is making sure that your health stays in line so that you actually in those years are enjoying those years versus, unfortunately, for a lot of people, chronic illnesses, diseases, and et cetera. So we may have another thing here on just longevity on that side. But Ann, anything you want to end us with before we close? Any other last second thoughts or things on your mind?
Well, one, I have really enjoyed getting to know you and this conversation. And, I think you're a lifelong learner yourself, right? You're
Yep.
continuing to talk about leadership. You're continuing to talk about what we need to be doing. And look, I really enjoy it. And I look forward to continuing, our relationship as hopefully, we're living longer and we got a lot of things we can do.
Yeah, and that's I think that is awesome, and I wanted people to hear Ann's story of just this going back to school, but also that fabulous career. Love that you talked about all the different mentors and people that saw things in you before you did, and so hopefully everyone benefited from this. And if you did, just make sure you like, share, comment, etc. But that's all for now. We appreciate everyone joining us, and this is Ed McGill signing off for Leadership with Ed. And our great guest, Ann Ackerley, out in Palo Alto in that great weather in California. So have a great day, everyone. Appreciate you.